Of 150 psalms, Psalm 1, which we just heard, says, "Buckle up." There are 150 psalms, and the first line, the very first verse, the first thing the psalmist thought we should hear is this: "Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers." Of all the beautiful imagery the Psalter contains, of the ones that we've memorized or kind of memorized over the years, of deers panting for streams of water, of green pastures where gentle shepherds lead, of looking to the hills from whence cometh our help, and all the praise God and salahs and let the words of my mouths, of all of that, Psalm 1 prefaces it all, and it is notable that line 1 doesn't start with God. It starts with us, those of us who may be happy. It teaches us about us. Now, this is not a commandment in the way of thou shalt or thou shalt not. It's not specifically an instruction either. It's more like, well, an invitation, a modeling, a simple statement of fact. Who is happy is the offstage prompt that sets the psalmist out to answer. And the psalmist begins, "Not those who follow wicked advice or who continue down the well-worn path of what is wrong. And it's not those who sit with the mean girls, snarking and rolling their eyes and laughing at whoever may actually be happy. Happy are those who are not unkind. Happy are those who find their delight in God and on whose word they think day and night." Earlier this week, I had a particularly restless night of sleep. More specifically, I should say that I had a perfectly fine first half of the night, the half that is governed by the sleeping pill I took, anticipating that after the day I had, I might not have the night that I want. But the second half was altogether restless. I didn't have Psalm 1 exactly in my mind as I lay there too hot and too cold and dog poking me and husband snoring, but after giving my mind a few laps around the track of spiraling, I did try to take control of the situation. I started saying the Lord's Prayer silently to myself and to God. Come to think of it, I've said the Lord's Prayer quite a lot this week, both with you and privately to myself, also at a hospital bedside. The Lord's Prayer is terrific meditation on the ways of the Lord for both days and night. It follows suit with that psalm instruction. And that night, earlier this week, I will say that I prefer to do my meditations during daytime waking hours. For the simple truth of the matter is that if I'm meditating at night, that means I'm not sleeping, and I would frankly like to sleep at night. But the night in question earlier this week had me awake, and I don't know. Something said, "Here, Will, try this." Words that can be written on my tombstone one day. And so I laid there silently, and I went through the words of the Lord's Prayer as I was taught them, which was at my bedside many, many, many years ago. When praying familiar patterns or reading familiar words, I look for what stands out to me in this particular instance. Why is reading or praying this right now both the same and different from all other times that I've read or prayed it? And there are some very good meditators in the church who call this practice Lectio Divina. It's a practice of praying or reading something slowly and faithfully until a word or a short phrase doesn't let you move on. For some reason or another, no matter how many times you've prayed or read this particular text, there's something that is sticky this time. It holds your attention and it invites your attention. In Lectio Divina, the practice is that once you get stuck in the goo, you put down the text and start meditating on the word or the phrase itself. This is an invitation to free association. Why is this word sticking with me today? And lateral teaching and learning. And of all the times that I've engaged in this practice with the Lord's Prayer, I often don't make it past the second word. More recently, I've found myself getting really stuck on the first person possessive plural of word one. Lectio Divina is a practice best practiced with some sort of timer. You need to be able to get out of whatever you've just gotten yourself into. But that's not what middle of the night is about. I'd gotten into bed. I wanted to stay in bed, preferably asleep. So the other night wasn't about finding the sticking place in the prayer itself. It was trying to stop my mind from all my thoughts by using the words that Jesus gives when we ask how to pray or how to sleep. And this night it was me, all alone, with all the unsticky, swirling thoughts of what needs to be done, of how to do it better, of where I messed up, and, well, that could have gone about 1,000,000 times better, but here I am. And I prayed the Lord's Prayer like one might count sheep. I started from the top and repeated it over and over like a record on repeat. And as you know how sometimes in those not quite yet early dawn hours, when you're pretty sure you're awake, when you think you're awake and you're mad at yourself for not being able to sleep, but then your consciousness clicks in somehow and you realize that you're not actually having a cup of tea with a pink and purple striped elephant floating on a giant lily pad, and suddenly you realize that you must have been asleep because that wasn't real. And suddenly you realize that now you're awake, floating in and out. When the ridiculousness of the dream itself is what made me realize I was dreaming, I then noticed that I wasn't making it all the way through the prayer either. And though I thought I was awake, I must have been falling asleep. Now that was the goal at the outset of this here practice. Let's remember that. But not being able to make it all the way through the prayer brought big senses of failure to me in the middle of the night. Why can't you just get through the prayer? Well, it's not that long, and needing to do better. To sleep, perchance to dream, these are our matters. But back to waking hours, back to the psalmist. Happy are those who do not follow bad advice, or even good advice from people otherwise up to no good at all. Happy are those who try a different path than the well-worn ones that are no longer working, and that take real courage to try to leave behind. Happy are those, says the psalmist, who don't talk behind others' backs or think of other people's good intentions as theirs for judging. Happy are those who get a good night's sleep. These are teachings very kind. They're not saying that you have to be happy. They're not telling us that we have to do one thing or another. They're simply noticing in a most kindly way that happy people, so thinks the psalmist, have some traits in common. Now, the book of Proverbs, to which we return for the third and final time of this lectionary cycle today, has something to say about happiness too. The Proverbs writer takes it even a step further. Here, in what you just heard, happy is an attribute that others may use to characterize you, and happiness comes along with other things, things like strength, dignity, wisdom, and the teaching of kindness. The bit of proverbial wisdom Wendy read for us this morning, like the beginning of the first psalm, is not a list of things you need to do in order to be happy or strong or dignified, wise or kind. It's no recipe for any of those things. It's an example of those things. An example, I might also say, of a very annoyingly perfect person, the sort of pinnacle of character to which I prefer to think of as only Jesus having mastered, and, well, fully human and fully God. He does have some advantages that most of us do not. I don't know that I like this Miss Goody Two-Shoes that we get in Proverbs this morning. They're pretty godly. This woman can do everything, and she does, morning, noon, and night. She doesn't rest. She has everything, beautiful clothes, a fine house, and more than enough to provide both for herself and her household and all of her charitable endeavors. This woman could rightly, I suppose, be called a saint. I hope somebody said that to her. Many women, many people, you should be reminded of your sainthood more often. And here, with the gifts of sainthood, are the same virtues of happiness and wisdom, kindness, strength, and dignity with which the psalmist begins their great symphony. Proverbs and the Psalm don't say anyone has to be any of these things. But in case you're interested, here's an example of one way you might do it. If you're interested in such things as happiness or wisdom or kindness, here's a way forward, friends. My trouble with Proverbs here is that this listing of daily feats of unvarnished reputation, of perfect regard and most polished action is exactly the sort of list that keeps me up at 4 a.m. for all the ways I have left such a list so dismally unfinished. I'm trying real hard not to join the scoffers of that psalm, but you'll forgive me if I say I find this woman a little insufferable. But yet, she isn't. There's something gentle in the text. I don't know that it's the language. I looked at the Hebrew. That's not a gentle language. The English, I don't know. Maybe it's that what the writer says is that she was known for opening her mouth with wisdom. And the teaching of kindness is always on her tongue. It's these words, wise and kind, that may be some of the greatest gifts we can offer each other. In a culture that values smarts and facts and gives demerits for how many back issues of the New Yorker separate us from what we're reading and what was just published, wisdom is a rare and beautiful thing. We spoke about some of this last week. There are books written on the topic. Often they fall into the self-help prescriptive mode, which doesn't really help. And in this same culture where being right is so necessary, how often do we simply forget to be kind? We try to outsmart one another. We give long lists of our credentials as if they're suits of armor. We pull the ladder up behind us and don't like sharing our success. I have long been someone who believes that in job interviews, kindness and enthusiasm count. And then when I got married, a cousin of mine gave me the helpful bit of advice of, Will, you can be right or you can be happy. I have so far refused to accept these limits. I'm happiest when I'm also right. But Patrick is here and will attest that I'm often neither. Good teaching is kind teaching. They'll forget what you say, they say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. If you're made to feel smart and capable and valued, then smarter and more capable and more valued you become. If you're routinely kept down, if you have unkind people with small minds and deep hurts, you will feel less smart and less valuable than you are. Your light will dim, and the digging out can take a lifetime. How much easier it would be if all of us could begin with kindness and placed our footing on the path to wisdom. Happiness may then soon follow, so too strength and dignity and clarity. So too simplicity, humanity. So too an unflinching spirit and a grateful heart. There is such a woman as Lady Wisdom, I know, is on many of our hearts this week, whose absence this morning makes this old church feel so much bigger and emptier. There is such a woman who modeled strength in the face of adversity, who modeled kindness with every card she wrote and every chocolate Easter bunny she gave the staff, whose contributions day and night enriched this church, and I dare say many, many of us, in ways I pray made her happy. For her ways certainly made us happy. By now, many of you know that Glenda Winson passed into eternal rest this past Friday evening. In the Talmud of Jewish scholars, it is written that one who dies on the eve or the day of Shabbat is tzedakah, a righteous person who is free of sin. In our tradition, we believe that God who made us is the same God who redeems us, is the same God who sustains us. We believe that the promises of baptism vows are made complete only in our death. We believe that in life and in death, we belong to God. The Proverbs portion we hear this morning begins with a simple question: a woman of great strength, who can find? I dare say the author never met Glenda, nor so many of you. Women of remarkable strength, West End, men of deep wisdom, people of kindness. This is how you're seen in the world. A gathering of God's beloved that is warm and open-handed and so very needed outside these walls. Oh, what wondrous love is this! O church that gathers and sustains, what wondrous love is this! O my soul that seeks its evening bliss, O my soul. What wondrous love is this, that we were gifted to witness the life of Glenda. And as from death she's free, Glenda sings on. Happy are those who sing and delight in God's goodness, and when from death will all one day be, will sing and joyful be. Maybe too a little wiser and a little kinder for the journey we've been on together, and those who have touched us, and those we touch. And through eternity, you'll sing on. We'll sing